As businesses around the world buckle in and brace themselves for the impact that the coronavirus pandemic will have on their operations, proper crisis management has become a necessity for company leadership. Yet only 54% of companies have a crisis plan in place. One of the most important actions that business leaders can take in the event of a global crisis event like COVID-19 is to quickly implement a plan to communicate company-wide updates. That's why Beekeeper prepared a general list of internal communication tips to help you effectively communicate with your team during a crisis situation. Download Beekeeper's free crisis communications checklist today at www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. That's www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. Welcome to the Crisis Averted Podcast, produced by CJ Media Solutions. I'm your host, CJ Arlotta. In this episode, I speak with Patrick Boyle, Executive Director at IgniteLI. During our conversation, he reveals how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the manufacturing industry and shares what IgniteLI has been doing to help manufacturers overcome challenges. Just a quick note about the recording. Pat and I recorded this conversation in mid-December of 2020. Feel free to send me your feedback at cj@cjmediasolutionsllc.com. Oh, and if you're listening to the Crisis Averted Podcast on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, review, or both. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Pat, thanks for coming to the podcast today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So for listeners who aren't familiar with you, Pat, mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Yeah, real quick. Patrick Boyle, I'm the Executive Director of IgniteLI. IgniteLI is the manufacturing trade association for all manufacturers here in Nassau and Suffolk County, here on Long Island, New York. And our manufacturers span 11 different sectors, from aerospace to defense to biomedicine, pharmaceutical, nutraceutical. And then out on the East End, we have all of the food manufacturers, the agriculture, and all the vineyards and the breweries as well. So it's really a very diverse set of businesses that span a little mom and pop shop in the garage to much larger pharmaceutical companies and aerospace companies that exist here on Long Island. I get to represent them all up in Albany, down in DC, and I talk to policymakers across both aisles and really get to talk about the great people that are doing wonderful things here.
And what are some of the top issues you're speaking with the elected officials up in Albany and in DC? What are some of the issues that you're discussing with them?
The cost of doing business is always a very relevant topic here in Long Island. Long Island is a very expensive place to live, which is a challenge for workforce retention and attracting young people to come here to Long Island and work. But other topics are, of course, labor. How do we get training for our folks to come in and build up their skills to fill those critical positions on the shop floor that are being left by what we call the silver tsunami or the gray wave of retirement aged folks that are leaving the shop floors and they're going off to retirement, which they deserve. But there's no one to come and fill in those spots after they've left, and they're leaving with all of that industrial knowledge. So now companies are looking at, where can I continue making my product? Am I going to continue doing it here on Long Island, or maybe should I go somewhere else where it's cheaper to produce these products and it's cheaper to find cheaper labor? Where is that labor going to come from? So we're in a generational transition period right now with these manufacturers that popped up after World War II with the Greatest Generation coming out here to the burbs. And now we're looking at grandchildren taking over their grandparents' businesses. And they're really taking this time to assess their business practices and really, is this the best place to exist? And quite frankly, we think it is. We want to keep these businesses here. So these are the conversations that I've been having with our federal representatives, our state representatives, and our local representatives.
And just going off of that, Pat, I believe IgniteLI has an apprenticeship program, correct? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we found that across 11 different sectors of manufacturing, there was one common denominator, one issue that we could really sink our teeth into, and it was that ability to attract, retain, and train a workforce who's going to come to my shop floor and commit to staying here. Because that's another big issue that they've been having is you'll train someone for 6 months, and then they'll walk across the street to another manufacturer for a nickel more an hour, and now you've lost that employee who you've now poured tons of hours into training. That's a big problem. So the New York State Registered Apprenticeship Program really offers us the ability to attract new talent, get that talent to stay with your company, and then we're going to build these classes to help those individuals continue learning while they're earning. And it's really a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for the employee who's now building up their skills in a trade, and allowing them to build on that career and make more money. It's a win for the businesses because here they have the ability to attract new talent and who will actually want to stay and work for them moving on in the future. So we found that this is really the best practice to go forward with. We've teamed up with New York State Department of Labor, SUNY, Suffolk County Community College. We're also talking to a bunch of other colleges too about how we can build and collaborate this program because it's really a great resource for our manufacturers here.
And how do manufacturers participate in that program? Is it specifically for your members?
Right now, it's specifically for IgniteLI members. We're building this in a way that when you come to IgniteLI, you're offered the ability to join into this program, and it exists for existing members as well. But really, we really want to attract more companies to this. We find that it's a really cool tool, and we've actually teamed up with MACNY. MACNY is the Manufacturing Association of Central New York. They've existed now for 104 years. They're doing what we're doing, and we're just really copying and pasting what they do. They've been a really great big brother for us, and they've been really leading the charge with apprenticeship and getting apprenticeship dollars up there in Albany. So we're very thankful for their leadership. We're very thankful for their partnership, and they are really the resource that has made this all happen.
In addition to the apprenticeship program, what are some of the other benefits members receive when joining Ignite LI?
Sure. So we've actually teamed up with a whole cadre of business solutions providers that specialize in manufacturing as they pertain to their specific industries. We have bankers, we have attorneys, we have accountants, insurance providers that are really wonderful resources for our manufacturers. They specialize in. Let's talk about insurance. We have an insurance provider that specializes in manufacturing. What's important for a manufacturer may not be important for a retail store, right? So these are individuals that we've been very careful and very choosy with bringing onto our team and inviting into this family. They offer real subject matter expertise and at a discounted rate for members. Training is crucial for our manufacturers to continue to thrive. We have teamed up with, like I said earlier, with apprenticeship, but a number of educational institutions that exist here on Long Island, and even some in the city that want to bring training to our manufacturers. This isn't just ISO training. This is training for your management, middle management, your shop floor management, all the way up to your CEOs and your financial officers. We have all sorts of training set up through our partners, and I think honestly that's probably right now our most robust resource. We also have grant writing ability through our former executive director, Jamie Moore at Industry Grants. Jamie's writing millions of dollars worth of grants every year for our manufacturers that are looking to expand or really have new projects on their horizons. Jamie is really a wonderful resource for attaining those dollars that are out there. We just need you to contact us and we'll get that ball rolling for you.
So, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the manufacturing industry? What have been some of the challenges?
Well, it's been dramatic for everybody. It's been dramatic for Long Island. Manufacturing took a very heavy hit early on when the governor shut down all businesses except for essential businesses. Well, what did essential mean? That was the first month of the pandemic. I was on the phone every day with Empire State Development, ESD, trying to figure out what exactly essential meant. So we didn't know if the aerospace and defense industry, well, of course they're essential. Food manufacturers, we have a huge amount of food manufacturers here on Long Island. They're booming right now. Well, they're certainly essential as well. But there's lots of other different types of manufacturers that maybe not, maybe weren't so essential. So what did that mean? Then we have manufacturers. Well, okay, so now we were labeled as non-essential. I have 60 employees. How do I get them back to work? What do we do? The governor announced that if there's a manufacturer out there who wishes to convert their shop floor to produce PPE to answer the call and help protect our first responders and our medical professionals, that the governor had money for you. Well, that was a great resource. We had a whole ton of manufacturers that were interested in that, but how did they get that money? So that was another couple months of me on the phone with ESD and trying to figure out, well, how can we actually answer the governor's call, get these manufacturers back up and running so we can produce that crucial PPE, because these companies were relying on PPE that was coming from across the globe, right? And that really highlighted a critical issue for manufacturing, critical issue for our defense policy is, well, why are we relying on PPE that's global dependent, right? To protect not only our first responders, but also the people that are making essential products, right? We had people making food here on Long Island that they needed to be protected as well, so they can protect the food that they're producing, right? So it opened up a really great question of, well, that global dependence on crucial products, why aren't we making these at home? And that brings us into now, I think, this stage of COVID is reshoring. Um, Reshoring is a very hot topic across lots of industrial fields, but it's the idea of bringing those produced products back home to the United States, bringing the production back home to the United States. It might be more expensive to produce things here, but it'll be reliable, right? We're not relying on a product that might come in, might not come in, depending on what the global economy does, depending on what the global pandemic does. We need these products now. So we have lots of shop floors and lots of businesses that are looking to bring products back so that they can produce them themselves. Now, it's going to be more expensive, but again, it's going to be reliable. And reliability in a supply chain is crucial.
Do you think we're going to see that shift now after the COVID-19 pandemic, or do you think that it's still going to take people a while to figure that out, that we do need to bring the manufacturing back to the home base because of an issue like a pandemic? We need to really have the resources to produce those goods. We can't rely on other countries for them.
Sure. Well, this has been certainly a very eye-opening time in our history, that we really do have to reassess a lot of things, how we do a lot of different business. But I think that certainly local governments see the importance in a localized supply chain, and we all see the value in a localized supply chain. When you're putting your next door neighbors to work, and Main Street is booming, and people are able to afford to stay here on Long Island, then the schools are full again, then the hospitals are full again, and it has a trickle down effect that will, I mean, be a boon for real estate, be a boon for every industry that touches having more people here on Long Island. Yeah.
Now, where does intellectual property fall into that?
Sure. So this past year, we saw President Trump set up a number of trade deals and discuss lots of topics in international relations specific to manufacturing. Um, President Trump had run on a number of topics, but one was he wanted to bring jobs back to the United States. He wanted to reshore manufacturing. So for that, manufacturers loved him. Another topic that was very important to manufacturers and creators was intellectual property. We had to hold folks accountable to IP theft, and as a result, I think that a lot of businesses found more confidence in their ability to go out and create and put new ideas out there because they were emboldened by IP policy that would hold countries and individuals really to some sort of standard where you can't, you have to be held accountable to 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 stealing. You know, so as far as 2020 goes, we saw the USMCA, U.S. Mexico Canada Trade Agreement, which replaced NAFTA. We saw the U.S. trade deal with China, both of which touched on intellectual property, and I think it was very important. Yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Pat, about essential workers, non-essential workers, and working out with the state to figure out which is which. Because when you think of what you do, I'm thinking the entire manufacturing industry, but manufacturing is very, I guess, segmented depending on what you're producing. So, how challenging was that to kind of, move around to the different manufacturers, figuring out who was essential, who wasn't essential? What did that look like? What were the discussions like going through the various levels of government?
So it was quite challenging, for sure. There are lots of manufacturers that have products that are manufactured somewhere else, right? So we have manufacturers that are building products built by other manufacturers. Now, those secondary manufacturers may not have been listed as essential. For instance, we had aerospace companies who were essential that were relying on nuts and bolts from another company that was listed as non-essential. As a result of those nuts and bolts not coming in, now the essential company can't produce the crucial products that the Department of Defense requires to continue protecting the country. And that was very harmful. So my time was spent on the phone discussing how we can get these companies listed as essential, and really what essential meant and what those qualifications were, and how that trickled down to those tertiary companies that were producing those, like I said, those nuts and bolts or those wires or really anything that the DoD needs.
So, how important is it? Because I mean, um, that's a huge benefit for manufacturers working with a association like IgniteLI to work with government officials to lobby on their behalf, to work with local, state officials, federal officials. Why is that so important for manufacturers to participate in an association like IgniteLI? What's the association able to do that they would not be able to do by themselves?
Sure. Well, last year, the Workforce Development Institute came out with a study on Long Island's pharmaceutical and nutraceutical uh, business environment. What they found was that business is good. These are companies that are growing, and they're growing exponentially. And now that COVID has happened, their products are even more in demand than they were in 2019. Uh, those companies continued hiring all throughout the pandemic. So did aerospace and defense. Across much of manufacturing, they were all still hiring while everyone else is being laid off. We went into the pandemic. I think unemployment was at like 3.4%, 4.3%, I think. And at its peak, we topped off at 14%. But all the while, most manufacturers here on Long Island were still hiring because we're still trying to fill the need for a skilled labor force. As far as what we did for those companies during the pandemic, and why having a trade union is so important. Listen, I was on the phone all at least the first three months of the pandemic, talking with folks who were up to their necks in COVID response, and I get that, and we were able to really forge those relationships and build on that during the pandemic. Now, I brought up pharmaceutical, nutraceutical earlier. That report highlighted the fact that there was no community around pharma and nutra, and in order to survive, we found by looking at other regions of the globe that have a thriving pharmaceutical, nutraceutical environment, they had that community that can come together and rally and talk to government the way that I was able to during COVID. And that's very important. Power in numbers is very important. It's also very important for training purposes. Educational institutions are not going to change their curriculum for one company, but if we all get together and say, hey, listen, we need to train the next generation of students to be able to do X, Y, and Z, they're going to listen to us. It's crucial. It's crucial. And now we're competing globally with regions of the world, countries of the world that have federally funded trade organizations. And now we're not federally funded. So we're already at a disadvantage. We have to come together as a community and talk about those things that we need. And through that talking, we become very powerful. We're not just competing with North Carolina and with Texas, with California. We're competing with China and with India, with Europe. This is very important that we strengthen as a community.
Do you think when you've been working with elected officials in the state and federal government, do you think they have been receptive to the concerns of the manufacturing community? Have there been barriers or challenges when discussing these issues?
Absolutely, absolutely. I find that when we discuss these issues with our federal representative, we've had here on Long Island, we got some good ones. I've been very lucky and blessed to come into this role with a lot of those relationships that were crucial. I come from government, Chris. I don't know if I mentioned earlier. Um, I was the deputy chief of staff for the third New York State Senate district, and in that role, I was also the director of the Senate's Homeland Security Committee. Before that, I was the executive assistant to the town supervisor at the town of Islip. Um, and thankfully, because of those relationships, we have very smart elected officials and policymakers that get it. They understand how important manufacturing is, and they see the numbers. They see the numbers. We have 3,000 manufacturers here on Long Island. We have 70,000 people, our next door neighbors, that are employed in manufacturing. I think the number was $7 billion of income brought onto Long Island because of manufacturing. This, these are big numbers, and our policymakers, thankfully, have been very positive in that.
You mentioned earlier about manufacturers pivoting during the pandemic. Have there been members of Ignite LI who've pivoted for PPE productions or anything of that sort during the pandemic?
Absolutely. So I always like to talk about, well, I always love to talk about D'Addario anyway. D'Addario is a instrument manufacturer in East Farmingdale. They produce 70% of the world's guitar strings,
They're
believe it or not.
they're on Long Island?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had I had no idea. I purchased their strings for my guitars.
yep, yep. They
Interesting.
are in East Farmingdale. They have,
Wow.
I think, one of the coolest shop floors that I've been on, and they were listed as non-essential. They
Wow.
produce again 70% of the world's guitar strings, and they were listed as non-essential, which was crippling for them. They have, um, gosh, I don't even know how many employees at this point, um, and they wanted to get their employees back to work. Listen, they saw that their employees were hurting to get back to work, and they wanted to get them back to work. They were trying to figure out how. The governor had offered money. So what they did was they began producing the plastic face shields, and they got pretty good at them. They got pretty good at them, and they, I think, got a couple nice sized contracts, and thankfully they got a lot of folks back to work, and they got rocking and rolling again. But they're a larger company. Now we had a lot of smaller companies that were looking to do the same. A big textile uh, call for to produce the paper shields and the cloth shields, and we had a number of manufacturers that actually went out and got sewing machines so they could just try to figure this out. And so they retooled their shop floors. They refit their shop floors. They figured out the new processes for, well, how do we produce this many face shields and make it profitable and answer the governor's call, all while doing it safely during a global pandemic. There were a lot of shifts there. Um, as a result, we saw a lot of companies make a lot of investment into buying new equipment. And for us then to, at the end of COVID, hopefully one day when this ends, if we're just going to throw the switch and turn all this off, now they've made all that investment for nothing. So we need companies to see the value in a localized supply chain and to continue purchasing these local PPE products. And we need to make it so that PPE is profitable enough to be made here on Long Island. Because the need for a localized supply chain, I can't stress this enough. It's crucial. It's crucial. So to answer your question, we saw a lot of companies make a lot of different pivots. They had to get very, very creative about how they did business. And thankfully, a lot of them were able to do it.
And how can members get the most out of their membership with Ignite LI?
Utilize the tools that we have. Again, we have training tools, we have grant tools, we have the apprenticeship program, we have networking programs. Our calendar is posted up on our website, and really be in a relationship with Ignite LI, be in a relationship with the manufacturers that are around you. Really, we're building a community here that is sorely needed. Uh, I love telling this story. We had a manufacturer get a Department of Defense contract to produce an electric box that was going to go on the bridge of an aircraft carrier. And they gave us a call. They said, listen, we got this contract. We need a wiring company that is able to produce this part for this electric box, right? And Jamie Moore was Jamie Moore was on the phone with them and said, walk out your door, make a left, look across the street, walk in that door. That's the guy you want to talk to. A lot of these manufacturers aren't talking to their neighbors. They're very competitive. Um, we're really building this community here so that those relationships are there for when you need them. And that, I think, is the real value in this organization, is the relationships and the collaborations.
What are some of the major challenges you're seeing in the manufacturing industry for 2021? And what are some of the things that is on the association's agenda when they go into the following year on the federal and state level?
Sure. Challenges are many, financial, of course. Like I said earlier, producing products here in Long Island, living here in Long Island, very expensive. Finding those skilled labor technicians that can do the job and work well, that's always going to be a challenge here. Um, Specific to 2021, COVID, this isn't over yet. This is going to be around for another couple months. Unfortunately, we want to do this. We want to continue working, of course. We want to do it safely, and then, of course, supply chain. Right, we're still dealing with supply chain shortages and slowdowns from global dependence on products. And then, specific to the political environment, we got a new presidential administration coming in. That's going to have trickle down effects on the Department of Defense. We have a supermajority in Albany that, quite frankly, I believe is going to take another look at the minimum wage. Right, so minimum wage starting in January 1st, 2021 is going to be $14 an hour. If that goes back up, if it continues to rise, we're going to have companies that are really going to start looking at other places to do their business, and that's really going to hurt. Like I said earlier, our schools, right? If those businesses are going to move, they're going to bring people with them. Our schools are going to be empty. Our hospitals are going to be empty. Main Street's going to be empty when all these employees go away. This is really the crux of what we're doing here. We're at IgniteLI. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to create an environment where enough people are employed here on Long Island where all those other industries are going to be able to thrive.
Pat, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. That was fun.